this computer. I think it's a better way to do it. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, welcome to the Soaring Society of Boulder Ground School series. Tonight, we're going to have a ground school on human factors of flight, which is a very important thing, of course, for pilots that want to come back alive.
This one's not on by selling. That's next week.
Yeah, here, let me put everybody on. Clemens, do you know how to make everybody go silent?
I'm trying. I just muted Phil. So Phil, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you can unmute Phil. But at any rate, while Clemens is working on that, I would like to get started here, and I don't think we have any club announcements, and so we'll just jump right into it here. I want to introduce Andrew Ainslie. Andrew is going to give a talk tonight about the condition, human factors, mostly on the ground, and when you're in a more stressful situation and are looking at the ground. So he started his flying career in his mid-20s in Zimbabwe and also South Africa. So he's flown and in the US too, of course. So he's flown a number of places around the world and in different atmosphere at different locations. He holds single-engine land, multi-engine land, and glider ratings. He was in the Texas pre-world contest. He's flown at Harris Hill and their regional sports contests, as well as Mifflin. So he knows how to do the ridge soaring. He has about 1,200 hours just in gliders. And he was also going to be working on and started his tow plane training. So he'll be giving us tows here pretty soon. So he's a fairly new club member. And I would like you to welcome Andrew Ainslie. Andrew, please take it away. And you're muted right now, sir.
Yep, there we go. Thank you, Armand. And just so if I do tow somebody, I don't make you too nervous. I do have somewhere in excess of 1,000 tows. So I won't be a total rookie when if you end up hooking up behind me. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to jump right in and get my slideshow going here. So I just need to do a share screen and then go full screen. Okay, so you should see does everybody see that full screen?
Yeah, perfect, thanks.
Okay, good. So two things. I'm going to start basically with 4 topics, but in 2 categories. I'm going to start with some sort of basic preparation. This is really set up more for those of you who are beginning to go into cross country. And for those of you who are doing cross country and any of these are a surprise, then I'm very glad we're talking about it because I think they're all very important. So I'm going to talk about sun protection, a very obvious one, hypothermia, a little less obvious, and hydration, one of the ones I see people getting wrong most often when they're new to cross-country soaring. And then I'm going to give a talk that maybe is a little more different from what many of you have seen. I've started giving this talk at contests, and it comes basically from a mixture of my experience landing out. I have more landouts than I really should have. And also cave diving. I did exploration level cave diving for about 10 years and got into a couple of sticky situations, and I learned a lot from that. So let's fire right in. So I'm going to start with sun protection, and I'm basically just going to, I hope that for most of you this is completely obvious, but I want to point out that we're in Colorado, and essentially the air attenuates UV light as it comes down lower. And so the higher up you are, the less attenuation there is. So I really dug around for this. The approximate statistic is that there's a 3% increase in UV exposure per 1,000 feet. Furthermore, UVB and UVC, which are the more potent UV sources, start getting worse as you get higher. And so this is something you have to worry about, much more so in Colorado than where I used to fly in Western New York. I mean, not only did we fly low, but of course we had a lot more clouds than Colorado has as well. So there's the obvious one, wear a hat. Sunblock. I have a recommendation here, which is there are these sticks. They look a little like a thick version of lip balm, and they're great in the cockpit because they're not goopy. They don't get over everything. You can just rub it on your cheeks and nose during the flight, the back of your hands, because suntan lotion does wear off quite quickly. One caveat, take it out at the end of the season, because if the mice smell that beautiful coconut smell in your cockpit, they're going to think it's food. So don't leave the stick in your cockpit over winter. Do remember the tips of your ears. I once spoke to a skin specialist who told me that one of the commonest location of skin cancer is right up here, because nobody thinks of putting suntan lotion there. So I know the hat protects you from that, but a lot of us don't wear the hat while we're rigging our gliders. So do remember the tip of your ears. Have sunglasses with UV protection. It's very hard actually to get sunglasses without it these days. Just make sure that you have UV protection. And then consider long sleeves and even gloves to protect your hands. Looking at mine, I'm 60 years old and I have the hands of a 70-year-old because I've spent far too much time in the sun myself. So do wear long sleeves and gloves, and that's going to help you with the next step. Okay, so let's pop right on to hypothermia. I learned this one very quickly early on when I started flying here because I got it wrong. And it can make your flight absolutely miserable. It's going to be freezing. If you have anything like a decent flight in Colorado, the temperatures at your soaring altitudes are going to be low, into the teens, maybe even below the teens, as you start getting closer to 18,000 feet. So here are some things I've learned the hard way. Wear decent socks. Those nice, thick hiking socks work great. Some of the biggest leaks in the glider are around the nose. So your feet tend to get colder faster than anything else. So sweatpants work as well. Wear long sleeves and thin gloves. They help you with the sun. They also help you with warmth. I use these cheap Home Depot gloves, sort of the ones made by Husky and companies like that. That's enough for most of what we do. And you still have a lot of tactile usage. So you're not trying to grip onto things, and they're very easy to use. I like using a zip up top because on the ground you can unzip it and then you can get it zipped back up again as it gets colder. Okay, so those are the two easy ones. I want to talk about one that I don't think a lot of people early on in their gliding career spend enough time thinking about. First of all, take a lot of water. You've all been told that. I take about 5 liters if I'm going to be flying 4 or more hours. I take a 3-liter bag and a 2-liter bag. And believe me, I've gotten to the ground, especially flying in Texas, where those are both completely empty. So take a liter an hour. That's what a lot of people say, and I think that's a reasonable amount. However, what I've learned is a lot of people have no way to get rid of that water. And as a result, they don't drink because they're worried about that. And that leads to dehydration, even if you do have something on you. So you have to have a way to go to the bathroom. Here are some of my suggested methods for doing this. And these are basically, as far as I'm concerned, ordered in order of quality of solution. The simplest is a double bag Ziploc. The team managers for the various sailplanes or sailplane captains are not going to love you if you use this method, because when you're bouncing around in a thermal, trying to use a double bag Ziploc just goes wrong all the time. So if you have to, if you've forgotten or you're just on your way to the airfield, double bag Ziplocs will work. If you are going to use that, don't overfill them. And this goes against every green idea out there, but at least you can get them out the window if you have to get them out the window. And so don't overfill them. Better is an absorbent product. And I actually use these when I fly power. There are these gels, basically. They have these bags that contain gel, and a sort of a Ziploc top. So you can use them. There's sort of a once-use product. So you'll need 2 or 3 for a flight. You can use it and get rid of it pretty easily. And because it absorbs the fluid, it doesn't spill all over the place. Sporties sells them, a lot of places sell them. To me, the best is an external catheter connected to either a bag or a tube that goes out of the glider. This is really easy to set up. So here's a platypus bag. I think this is a 3-liter bag. What I did is I took the hose and I cut the hose off about a 15-inch length. And over here, what you will see, where's my camera, is this is a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch bob. The 1/4 inch bob works well on the bag side. The 3/8 inch bag works well on the external catheter side. And in a second, I'll show you what I mean by an external catheter. You can pick this up at Home Depot, Lowe's, anywhere else. It costs under $1. You can use any of your old water bags. I do have one suggestion. The one thing that I wish I had on this, and I'll probably change for the season, is it helps to have a valve on it. And many of these bags now come, these drinking bags come with a valve so that you can shut it off. And if you have to, and believe me, I have filled up a 3-liter bag on one flight before. If you have to, you can then close off the valve, take it off, empty it out the window, and then keep flying and put it back on again. So a valve is not a bad idea. Okay, so here's some examples of some products. This is one of the brands I use, which is the Freedom external male catheter. These things are pricey. I will warn you of that. They're typically around $2 each. But you can buy them. I buy them 200 at a time for about $150. So it comes out at about $1.50 each. You can find them. The most frequent place to find them is the places that specialize in products for old people. I will warn you that when you buy them, you're going to get on their list and they're going to send you all sorts of mails for electric wheelchairs and all sorts of other stuff. But if 200 is going to last you many, many seasons. So one suggestion is maybe team up with 3 or 4 other people, buy a box of 200, divvy them out, and 30 or 40 catheters will probably last you a season. And as you can see, that little piece at the top there, this little piece here, that's what connects onto the 3/8 inch bob. 2 hints. One, a little bit of grooming helps because these things have an adhesive on them and it will make your life hell trying to get it off if you haven't done that. So that's just a little hint. The other is, I don't find that adhesive very effective, particularly in hot climates where you get sweaty. So I know this sounds a little gross, but I take a piece of wing tape and I tape the bottom of the catheter to make sure it doesn't slip off in flight, and that can help a lot. So there we go. There's 2 hints based on years and years of various failures with these systems. And I'm telling you, if you set this up properly, it's hands-free. You don't have to worry about it for the whole flight, and it just relieves, a bit of a pun, but it relieves a lot of, one of the biggest problems associated with good hydration. So please spend the $30, get a bag, spend the whatever it takes to buy enough catheters for a season and use them. It's going to make your flights a lot more comfortable. Okay, so that's the first quick section. And if there are any questions, I've got a couple of minutes to take some questions if anybody has them on that. Nothing? Okay. So let me jump quickly into, oh, sorry, I forgot. This is my last, I forgot this slide. Here's an example of a product that has one of these gels in it. They're called Travel Johns. Again, they're not that cheap. Pack of 18, $44. So a little over $2 each. I find these super useful when I fly power. I haven't used them in a glider, but again, they very convenient, works pretty well. And there we go. That's just a suggestion for if you really hate the idea of these external catheters and that whole system. Okay. So let's go on to emergencies. And let me start by saying that I got interested in this after a couple of, frankly, nearly fatal situations that I got into when I was doing exploration level cave diving. These are solo dives, often 3 to 12 hours long, extended decompression, very complicated equipment, and stuff would go wrong. And I learned the hard way that I wasn't always as well prepared as I'd like. So I started reading a few books on survival. Survival is often about what to do if you're stuck in the forest for a month or a week or 4 days. But there's often a section in these survival books talking about sort of short-term survival. What to do in that 30 seconds to 10 minutes when something goes wrong and you have to fix it quickly. For us, think about outlandings. Think about being in the middle of the landing and something changes quickly, like a plane showing up that we weren't expecting, or a cow or a deer on the runway or something like that. Collisions in the air, when you are forced to exit your glider and open a parachute. These sort of quick emergencies are the things I started focusing as I started reading these books. So there's this book by Gonzalez. It's an interesting read. It's not fabulous, but I think he makes some good points. So let me just go through some key pointers. The first is one of the hardest, which is to stay calm. And this is easier said than done. But one of the things you see in the survival books is people talk about how, and this is, people in sort of premier military organizations talk about how they talk about how the Rambo types are often the first to die. So just going in there gung-ho and just running at it and saying, I've got to do this quickly, I've got to fix it up, not a good strategy. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sort of the exact opposite. So there's a lot of evidence that for a lot of people, what they tend to do in an emergency is to go into a form of catatonia. For example, there are stories of when the Titanic went down, most people were not running up and down the decks like crazy trying to find a boat. They were wandering slowly, sort of mouth agape, just in a daze. And I've heard people talk about it and even seen videos of things like somebody will be low on a final glide back to an airfield on a cross country. And instead of at 1,500 feet saying, oh my God, my glide computer says I'm 1,000 feet under, time to look for a field, they just keep going, and they just keep going, and they just keep going until they hit the trees. And that type of catatonia is equally dangerous as going into the quick panic. So how do you fix this? First thing, train, train, train. That's what the military does. That's what we do. So they call this implicit learning in the literature, and we practice it with winch launches, but we practice it with winch launches over 200 feet above the airfield. That's not the dangerous. I mean, frankly, that's an easy situation to sort yourself out from as long as you've done it 3 or 4 times and you know what to do. The dangerous one is when it breaks 20 or 30 or 50 feet above the ground, especially at our airfield. So what do you do about that? Because you can't train for that. No instructor is going to pull the rope on you at 20 feet, not in our airfield. You can train for it the same way if you look at Clemence's video on where he talks about the emergency fields. I'm sure that most of our experienced pilots do exactly what Clemens does. You get off the ground and you're saying, land ahead. And you get off the ground and you're looking for that field and saying, I'm going to land there. And then you're looking, I'm forgetting their names, and you're looking for that further field and saying, I'm going to land there. So that when the rope breaks, you don't even have to think about it. It's like, oh, air brakes on, turn, land. And training absolutely helps. Similarly, when you're flying cross country, always be looking for fields, always be looking for outs, always be thinking about, can I get down that pass or am I now too low? If I'm too low, what's ahead of me? And just keep thinking about that. Think about wind direction all the time, because a downwind landing, the difference between a downwind landing and an upwind landing when you do an off-field landing is you'll probably use 3 times the space. And it's the difference between completely saving your glider and turning it into a bundle of broken glass fiber in the fence if you go the wrong way. So where are the winds coming from? Look at lakes, look at fields, and just keep thinking about that. So train for it on every single flight. I just thought this quote was interesting from Malcolm Gladwell, because here, back to what I was saying earlier about these sort of 2 modes that are most dangerous. Choking is about thinking too much. What should I do? What should I do? And which field should I take? And then 10 minutes later, when you're 300 feet above the ground, you run out of options. You just got to land straight ahead of you. So don't overthink it. But on the flip side, panic is about thinking too little. And I think that's an interesting one. And I'll come back to that in a second. Let me just give you a mnemonic that is often used at survival schools, which is stop. The first part of stop is stop. In other words, just prevent yourself from going into panic mode. Spend a second saying, what do I need to do? Think, observe, plan, and act. So those are steps I recommend. And think about that as you're thinking about how it is that you can go about whatever it is you're doing. Stop quickly and just get an image of what's happening around you. Observe, think, plan, act in that sequence. The biggest danger, and this has nearly killed me on a couple of occasions, and I'm serious about that, is becoming too tunneled. You actually become so focused on something that you don't see the stuff around you. There's a famous Stanford experiment where they say to people, I want you to count the number of times a basketball is passed on a basketball field. You can Google this and find it on YouTube and look at the video yourself. And then after the video, they say to people, and you have to count, and there are about 30 passes. After the video, they say to people, did you notice anything odd about the video? And they say, no, I didn't see anything odd. Well, in the middle of the video, a person in a gorilla suit walked across the field. And if you're focused on just thinking about how many passes there are, you won't see the gorilla. There's another experiment they did with light planes where they basically had a simulator and they were asking people to do landings. And then particularly less experienced pilots. And then in the middle of the landing, they would put a plane in the middle of the airfield and people wouldn't spot it because they're so focused on their touchdown point that they don't see anything further along the runway. I think it's one of the things where training really helps, but it's also with thinking and understanding that conditions might change so that you don't get overly tunnel visioned can really, really help. So I'll give you one example where I did it right, one example where I did it wrong. So doing it right in the Harris Hill contest about 3 years ago, I had to do an outlanding. I got low on a long, long glide. I picked a beautiful green field. And then when I was about 700 or 800 feet above it, I realized that it was corn, and it was late enough in the year that that corn was probably 4 or 5 feet high. I probably would have survived, but my glider would not have. So at the last minute, I had to pick another field. It was a lousy field. It was probably 20 degrees uphill, rough pasture. But I put a little hole in the front of the glider, but everything else was fine, and I survived great because I kept rethinking, do things still look good? Do things still look good? So that one I did right. The one I did wrong was about a year before that. I was towing my glider behind my trailer behind my van, and was on a hill, and it came unhitched as I was going up the hill. I panicked because that hill goes downhill fast into a little valley, and I had visions of $120,000 of junk accumulating at the bottom of the hill. So I thought I slammed the van into park, ran out the back, got to my trailer, and as I got to the trailer, I got slammed from behind by my van. I broke my femur. It was a compound fracture. The bone was sticking out the side of my leg. I lost 4 pints of blood, and had it not been for the quick actions of some Harris Hill members and of an amazing team of first responders, I probably would have bled out there right on the scene. And that's because I got so tunnel visioned on, you got to stop the glider, you got to stop the glider. I wasn't thinking about stop, think, look around you, secure the car. And these are the types of situations which that tunnel vision will kill you. So, and again, I'm going to say that I don't know how you get to do that, because I've had examples when I've done it well and badly, but just keep thinking about it if you are in an emergency situation. So there's a fine line between reacting intuitively and thinking things through. Reacting intuitively happens with implicit learning by training for these emergencies over and over again. But even during that situation, step back and make sure, is that runway clear? So hard to do when you're in an emergency situation. Is that runway clear? Is there a better option? Do I know that I'm going to be safe? And just keep thinking, is there another plane on approach from the other side? Just keep thinking about these things as you go through the emergency. So I've gotten it right and I've gotten it wrong. I won't go through my cave diving stories, but they're equally harrowing. They're a little like that femur break. So I've gotten it right and I've gotten it wrong over the years, but I'm hoping that the more I think about this, the higher my chances are of survival. Okay, so that's my talk about emergencies, and it's one of the hardest ones to get yourself ready for. Armand, happy to hand it over to Phil.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you very much. That was great. Appreciate you talking about some issues that are rarely talked about because people get a bit embarrassed about, how do you relieve yourself on a long flight in a glider? And so thank you for bellying up to the bar and giving the group that talk. It
Yeah,
is
one comment about the relief system that I would make is watch the freezing temperature level, especially if you use an extra because this thing will freeze up, and then you get stuck. You have to descend until it's warm enough, and then you can keep going.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons for bagging and bombing. You don't have the freeze up problem. But
Well,
yeah,
I have one comment I'd like to make too, regarding dropping your bags overboard, etc. There's an etiquette involved with that. You don't want, if you're in a gaggle, you don't want to either drop your urine or you dump your water out.
Yeah, I would not throw a bag
Yeah.
out the window, but that's me.
yeah. Well, I like what he said with you have the bag, you keep it in your cockpit, and yeah, that's probably a
Better to buy a bag that costs $30 because you're gonna keep it.
one that doesn't break in the cockpit. Somebody sent, I'm going to take a moment here. Somebody sent Danny Marshall sent a question about practicing rope breaks at 20 feet. And why it's not done. There's a few reasons why, a couple reasons I would say as an instructor why it's not done. First, you're putting the equipment at risk, even if you're not putting yourself at risk. I was trained that if you ever do that as a CFI, put a stiff arm on the spoiler handle, because somebody that gets that will tend to pull the spoiler handle straight back and drop the glider precipitously, and both people in the glider will tend to have a bad back afterwards. You can also do damage to the gear. The other issue is, and especially on a field like Boulder, where we really don't have a heck of a lot of room, if you do that, you run the risk of not being able to stop before you get to the hill. It's something that's pretty rare happens. And in the first ground school of this year that we had, unfortunately, we didn't get a recording of it, but we had members who had just experienced a power failure of the tow plane on launch. And he was just getting off the ground when that happened. And it was a young pilot. He did very well. Both the tow pilot and the glider pilot performed very well without practice. And we had some discussions later about which direction to turn and all that. But I think it was an experience that doesn't happen very often, and training for it. You're taking more risk than you need to. If you really want to train for it on Condor, where you can, get off the ground and then see what you have to do to stop. And if you bang up the equipment on Condor, it's not too bad. So anyway, with that, I'd like to introduce Phil Ecklund. Phil is perhaps the longest serving member in and Soaring Society of Boulder. He is, of course, one of our premier instructors. And Phil joined United out of college, so however many years ago. and he was a flight instructor for Vietnam pilots going to Vietnam. Bought his first glider in 1967. I think he told me what it was, but I didn't recognize it. He was flying contests in Elmira. He also became a United Airlines pilot for 36 years. I asked him what he flew, and he said he flew basically everything that United had, starting with a DC-6, which is a little before my time. I don't really know what a DC-6 is, on up to the 747. He has about 4,500 hours in gliders, totaling 200,000 miles. He also did a climb to 39,500 feet, which I think he's going to talk about in this talk. But he's been a member of SSB since 1965. And so with that, Phil, would you like to go ahead and give us your presentation?
Yes, thank you very much, Armand. I want to thank you for putting this together, inviting me to participate. And it's been a wonderful thing for our club, creating the ground school series, and it's nice to be a part of that. So my talk is going to be 3 subjects, and I'm going to put up my first slide, which is, oh, that's not it. Let me see. Let's get rid of this. Okay, can you see that?
Negative.
Nope, nope.
Okay, let's try another share. Let me see here. We should go down and be able to, I'm looking for the little zoom feature. There it is, there it is. That brings you back, and we'll get rid of this page. And let's try this again.
The green button on the bottom where it says screen share. Share screen.
Got it, okay, thank you. And so the wrong page is coming up, but let's see if we can get the right page here. Thank you for your patience here. It's amazing how well this works when you practice with it, but get rid of this guy. Screen share again. Okay, I'm going to try. We'll start this over. Here we go. So can you see this?
Negative.
Okay. Okay, start here again. I'm gonna hit share screen.
There you go. All right. Well, we got your.
What do you think now?
You're at home. Yeah, we should see your background, screen background.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yosemite.
Okay, thank you.
But I think you're making progress.
Okay, thanks.
There we go.
This isn't visible. Is that right?
Yep, now we can see a hand-drawn whiteboard.
Okay, essentially, these are the topics I'm going to talk about. Number 1 is a Black Forest glider port 134 climbed to 39,500. And this is about 1965, 64, 65. And we're going to talk about the oxygen system that we had on board on some of the, and some of the problems we had with frosting, bends, and several other problems. The third item is going to be contrails, just a discussion of contrails for a few minutes and how much information that we can gain from the contrails. And item 4 is the famous SSB members. And we've had 3 special members in Lou Feyerabend, Jack Kutner, and of course, Steve Fawcett. We're all club members and did unusual things in the meteorological world. Okay, so I started this, I'm going to minimize this. I was leave well enough alone, I guess. Huh. So I started at the Black Forest. I spent a summer there before I decided whether I was really going to, I'll tell you what, I'm going to open up this other video here. I have another screen. So I started flying just to see if I was interested in flying. One of my first flights was in the 134, went to 39,500 feet. Everything that you could imagine to happen probably did happen. And the first thing was that, tell me if you, okay, good, you can see that. When I got to 35,000 feet, everything was going just fine. Good rate of climb, everything was smooth, the controls worked great. But at about 35,800 feet, I discovered this is a 35,000 foot altimeter. And so you're going up at about 800 feet a minute. And what do you do next? So, so essentially I got my stopwatch out and I was, got the timer going on the rate of climb. And I was trying to make it to 40,000 because then you're eligible for the triple Lenny pin. But then the canopy started frosting over, and I had gloves, and I ended up having to clean the canopy off with my glove as I got higher. And then there was another glider up there, Hod Taylor, who was about 2,000 feet above me, and we were calling off our altitudes to make sure that we had vertical separation. And he was okay, but he still was. He was scratching his canopy and trying to clear the way. And so, okay, here we go. And so basically, I'm going to show the oxygen system now. And basically, the mask that we have is this old military mask. And you can see there's an inhalation valve down at the bottom, and you have exhalation valves on the sides here, and a microphone. And it's very important to have the microphone because you don't want to lift your mask away from your face because you're going to lose your pressure, and so you're not going to get the pressure that you need in order to put the oxygen into solution in your lungs, which is essentially the reason for the pressure demand. So this is a quick look at the A14 regulator. This is a 100% position of the selector valve. And you're also, I'm going to go to the first photo here. This is on the ground, you'd have it in 100% normal position. And then it goes to, you turn this rotary knob, and your first position would be safety. But before you get started,
it's 7:45.
It's really a good idea to pre-breathe oxygen. If you can pre-breathe for 30 minutes, or at least when you start your takeoff, you'll denitrogenate your blood. And that reduces the chances of getting the bends, which is pretty important. Then as you're climbing above 30,000 feet, if you switch to safety, it just gives a constant flow of oxygen. And you can tell whether your mask is seated well or not, and you can tighten it up as you need. And then as you go higher, you always precede the altitude you're going to, and I'm going to show the next slide here, by selecting the next higher altitude on the regulator. So here you go from safety and then to 41,000 feet would be the next selection. That gives you more pressure. And eventually you go to 43,000. And the early world altitude records were set with this A14 regulator at 45,000 foot settings. And they actually went very close to 49,000 feet with this regulator. So as far as the connectors on the regulator, I don't know if you've all seen a bailout bottle, but this is a bailout bottle. It's characterized by the pressure and also the green apple. That this is the way you activate the bottle, and you want to make sure that you strap the bottle to your leg, because that way you can if you need to bail out, the bottle will stay with you and it won't be flailing around. So connected, this is a quick disconnect connector. This is the hose going to the mask. This is the hose going to the oxygen source. And this is where the bailout bottle connects with the connector to this quick disconnect unit here. This is what it looks like when you're wearing the mask and with all the connectors and everything. So it takes some practice, takes getting used to. High altitude breathing takes a lot of energy because your lungs fill up by themselves with the pressure, but you have to force your lungs to expel the air out of your lungs. And after doing that for an hour or two, you're very, very tired. If you have any questions along the way here too, please ask. So when I got started, I took a course at CU, and the course was an undergraduate self-directed study. They connected me with NCAR. That made a lot of things possible as far as high altitude flying. They were able to, I acquired a pressure suit along the way, and they set up the training at Edwards Air Force Base with NASA and with the Air Force. And this is what the pressure suit looks like. This has a helmet with a faceplate. A cable will prevent the helmet from popping off the top when it's inflated, or if you bail out, the cable holds it down. These cap stands expand and they pressurize your arms mechanically and your legs. And essentially that's what an early generation pressure suit does. In a way, it's less comfortable than the ones they use today, but it uses much less oxygen, and so you can stay up longer. So I wanted to talk about contrails. I don't have any pictures of contrails, so when you're looking up at contrails, I don't know if everybody uses them to tell whether the wave is working or not. But if there's a series of dashes in the contrail, essentially it's where the contrail rises in the lift, you'll form a little cloud will be there. But then when it goes back down and heats up a little bit, then the contrail disappears. And you can see a whole series of these contrails. And essentially it tells you approximately how high the wave goes. You can tell what the crosswinds are. And but just studying the contrails is very interesting. So another thing with contrails, Northwest Airlines did a study in the 50s, and they're having accidents with their passengers in airplanes with extreme turbulence. So they figured out how to forecast the wave, and they would route their coast-to-coast flights around the strong wave areas. And one thing that they learned, when you look up and see a contrail, it looks like an S, a very gentle S. And their notion was that when the airflow hits the continental divide at an angle, it is pushed up by the divide, creates laminar flow going down the lee side. And the laminar flow if say there's a 30-degree angle, wind hitting the continental divide, as the laminar flow progresses, it straightens the airflow out. So it's pretty much perpendicular to the mountain. And then when it breaks loose again, it rises up and it resumes the original direction of the airflow before it hit the mountain. And so they did some research on it, but I don't see much in the literature since then. So moving on, Lou Feierabend was one of the early wave pilots, and one of the contributions he did was he learned how to dissipate the frost that builds up inside of your canopy. And there are about 3 different methods that he used. One was creating a tube from the exhalation valve overboard that fit in the window itself. So there's no airflow through the window, but you put the moisture overboard. A second one was to run a tube from the exhalation valve back to the aft fuselage. And so the frost would form on the fuselage and not on the canopy. And I think the third most useful system that I used was to create storm windows. In McEckland, you take pieces of plastic and double-sided tape that's maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, and you cut out panels, as many as you need. Oftentimes you'd have 3 in the front, maybe a couple overhead or on the sides. And that is an excellent way to keep frost off the canopy. And some people actually use three pane. They use 2 of those extra panes and really keeps your canopy frost free. So Lou, that's what Lou did. And Lou Feierabend. And so one year he went to visit the Wassergruppe, and he brought back some test tubes with actual Wassergruppe. And some folks haven't heard about it, but that's where gliding really began after Otto Lilienthal. But that's where it really began in Germany in the 30s. And he gave me his diamond badge when he quit soaring afterwards, which was very nice. Then Jaak Kuttner was very active during World War II. First, he started as an attorney, and he flew in the Wassergruppe, and set the world's first altitude record at about 22,000 feet, having no idea what produced the lift to get him up there. And he had no oxygen. But also later he was involved with the Sierra Wave project at UCLA, which did one of the first really scientific studies of the mountain wave. And that's when essentially about the same, that was a little bit after Simmons had developed the Simmons Wave Memorial and developed the triple Lenny pins. If you get above 40,000, then you get a third pin, third lenticular. I made it to 39.5, so that's not quite far enough, but above 35,000, you get the double, and above 25,000, you get the 1 Lenny pin. Steve Fawcett, I think most people have known Steve Fawcett, or if they've heard of him. He started flying the mountain wave in the I think it was in the 80s. And he, so I'm going to go back to this other computer. And so I don't have any more slides, but he eventually got checked out in the wave. He went on to set some world altitude records. He went to, I believe it was about 55,000 feet. He started the Perlon project that continues today after his death. And they've gone to 76,000 now with the Perlon project with Jim Payne as the PIC. And he also had sailed, made world record sailing around the world in his catamaran, around the world solo flights in his balloon, and just an extraordinary individual person. So, and if there's a fourth person to add here, it's probably going to be Armand, because he's contributing so much to the Soaring Club and making these ground school sessions so useful that thank you very much, Armand.
Well, Phil, thank you for that great presentation and taking us up to 39,000 feet. And finding out that our altimeter doesn't work when we get up there a ways. That is not a problem I've encountered yet, but I'll keep that in mind if I ever do try to get that high. So at any rate, are there any questions about the high altitude? This kind of fits together with a presentation we had a few weeks ago from Alfonso. He talked about wave, but he didn't really talk about getting up above 18,000, breaking it above the echo airspace. So at any rate, this was pretty interesting, a bit of an adventure to go up there. Any questions, comments?
Hey, Phil,
Suggestion?
I've got a question. if you
Yes.
don't mind. Did you worry about VNE and restrictions on airspeed and flutter and stuff like that? And how did you handle that?
I had a higher altitude project and some NASA folks figured out what the VNE is on the glider. So I have a curve, so I knew exactly, and I had it posted on the airspeed indicator. The true airspeed is what we're concerned about in flutter.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was? Because it must be crazy low.
Yes, I've looked at it just the other day. And this was for a standard class Cirrus, which I believe has a Wortmann airfoil. And it was actually much higher than I thought. We had it designed to figure out what it was at 65,000 feet. And I believe it was around 80 knots. I could tell you at another time, I could look it up and tell you exactly what those numbers are.
Thank you.
And were you getting close to the coffin corner?
No, at that 39,500, there's strong lift. And so I was not looking out a whole lot to work it. I was just looking at the vertical speed, the variometer, and keeping the airspeed constant and working a pattern. So I just stayed in the lift. And the lift is produced.
At some point though, aren't you getting where your true airspeed is pretty high, but your indicated airspeed is going to be getting close to stall speed? So
No, with the gliders,
coffin corner
with the high aspect ratio wing, you don't have that much of a problem. It's with the airliners, 727 at 41,000 feet. You probably have 20, 30 knots between stall speed and before you get a Mach warning. And that's fine, except that if you get turbulence, that increases the G on the airplane. Or if you're in a 20 or 30 degree bank, that's 1.5 Gs. And so that brings those two numbers very close together.
But that's not so much a problem with gliders that have the high aspect.
Well, it is for the Perlon. And I don't know how much distance they have between their true airspeed or Mach. They may have Mach limits. I'm sure they have Mach limits with the Perlon at 76,000 feet.
Yeah, it's pretty cold up there. So the Mach numbers, the Mach 1 is going to be a lower number.
Yes. Yeah.
Lower speed.
Any other questions?
Well, if not, then we'll wrap it up here and say goodnight to everybody and welcome everybody back for the cross-country presentation that Bob Caldwell is going to give us next Tuesday, and you won't want to miss
It's
that.
8 o'clock.
Say again?
Yeah, great job, Andrew and Phil.
Thank you.
Good presentation, guys.
Thank you. And thank you, Bill. And thank you, Armand, for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
well-
very much.
Yep. All right. Well,
See you
good
next
night,
week.
everybody.
Thanks, Armand.